Welcome to The Whole Pineapple. I'm Ruby Boris.
And I'm Ann Judge. The Whole Pineapple is a podcast about wellness focused around fertility. And on these weekly mini episodes, we bring you bite-sized ideas for you to snack on.
Like breathing exercises, book reviews. Maybe we'll review some scientific research, or we'll share some wellness and fertility stories from our listeners.
So if you're looking for a tip or a trick related to your fertility and well-being, then you've come to the right place.
Let's dig in.
Well, welcome back to the Whole Pineapple Snack Edition. We are here. I'm Ann and
I'm
Ruby. And we are so pleased to welcome back Mollie Hike from Roaring Adventures. Hopefully you're able to listen to her full episode, hear her story of how she went from having a blog to having a book to having a nonprofit and helping other people. And so if you listen to that, you're probably thinking, how do I potentially apply? Because one of the things we talked about is that their definition of first responder is pretty broad. So we think probably a lot of our listeners, this could be something that you might want to look into. So thank you so much for coming back to tell us a little bit more about the specifics of how, the grant process happens.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm excited to share. I thought even if there's an opportunity too, just to share, if someone doesn't qualify for a grant through us, just even starting with maybe 6 things that someone can look at or consider as you start to look for grants or financial support that might be out there.
Yeah, we can start wherever you want to start. So what do you think is the best way to kind of like...
Ears. Let's figure this out.
I think
because you know a lot more than we do.
For us, just like you said, our definition of first responder is expanded. And so typically when you think of first responder or active military, you think EMS, firefighters, law enforcement. And for us, it is those things, but we've added a few to that. And so that includes 911 dispatch. That also includes nurses. We really felt that was an important piece for us to include as part of that definition. The other piece for us, specifically to Roaring Adventures, is that we do ask that there is a diagnosis of infertility for either partner, regardless of background, at least one partner experiencing that medical diagnosis of infertility. But if you don't qualify and you don't meet those things, we still as an organization aren't going to abandon you. We are going to connect you in with additional partners or resources that we work with across the U.S. That could be another nonprofit that we know is within that space, or other organizations that are looking to come alongside of people as well that are experiencing that diagnosis.
And how do people reach out to you? Do they just go on your website? Do you have a form to fill out, or kind of walk us through that initial process?
Our grant is specifically open once a quarter, 4 times a year. And so, for example, our grant is currently open right now and will be open until June 30th, and then it'll open up again each quarter and follow thereafter. So you go onto our website, roaringadventures.org, and you request an application. We send you that application, and as part of that, there's an attestation that you're saying you serve and meet that first responder or active military definition. If you're in the military, what branch or position. And then from there, you complete essentially your application with us. The few things that you, as an individual, I think that you might want to be looking for when you're looking for a nonprofit, whether that be Roaring Adventures or really anyone else that is in this space of providing family grants, is the organization that you're applying to credible? Do they truly fund that? What does that look like? Who are their partners? Are they truly a 501c3?
Because you're giving a ton of your personal information to somebody when you fill out these applications. Like, I think about that sometimes. You're giving like all your background and your demographics, and you definitely don't want to just be putting that out there into the netherlands of the internet.
Yeah, and when you're sharing your personal, like where you live, your address, your phone number, your contact information, your financial situation or your financial status, it's really important that you protect that and work with partners that are trusted in that space. Often with an application comes an application fee. And you'll see this pretty consistently across multiple nonprofits, but that provide family building grants, but making sure that that fee isn't something that is too egregious or is too much that's outside of your budget as well, or considering having a family member cover that application fee as part of that. For us, our application fee is $65. We've seen it in some other organizations up to around $100 for an application fee, often because it just takes many hours when you have multiple applicants to both verify the medical background and go through that part. And then in some cases, a background check if they are a recipient as well. And so there's just a little bit of time, a lot of time that goes into that and the consideration.
So just to go back to, and if the group has that 501c, that means that they have proven in some way, right, that they are a nonprofit. That's how you know that they're not taking your application fees and just saving that and not actually giving grants. Is that sort of why it's a good safety check? Or
I would say it would be kind of your first step to the safety check. The second piece would be do they have actual recipients? If you're questioning it, what clinic partners do they have? Or what attorneys are they working with? Because unfortunately, in some cases, they could say that they're an incredible organization and those funds could be at risk, or they may not allocate a grant at the end of that. And so recognizing that those of us that need that support or assistance to be able to grow our families, protecting that and asking questions is okay. If they can't answer your questions, that might raise
a little red flag there, yeah.
For sure. But there are many incredible organizations that, like I said, that we work with that are trusted partners as well. So if someone comes to Roaring Adventures and let's say that they didn't qualify, we would connect them into one that we knew was reputable within the space as well and established here in the United States.
And this is one of the challenges for grants in general. It always reminds me a little bit of like college applications, how like everyone has their own form and their own fees. And you're like, where's the common app for fertility grants where I could just like write one essay about my heartbreaking story and send it out to 10 people? Because it's so hard to have to keep reliving the same thing again and again.
In different formats.
Yeah.
Oh, but you know what? Who would be better at filling out paperwork than first responders and nurses? Like in military, like we're really good at paperwork.
I think, and just like you shared too, I think is making sure that you qualify before you apply.
Before you do all that. Yeah.
Because that's a lot of effort and time and energy, both emotionally and, just in the physical time that it takes to be able to complete that. And making sure that you qualify based off of often, for us, we have an FAQ that someone can read through and say, do I qualify? What are those pieces that go into that before I take the time to fill out or even request the application? For us, I think the other piece is, are there specific diagnoses? In some cases, like for us, we have that expectation of a diagnosis of infertility, and other organizations might have parameters that are around their requirements as well. And so just familiarizing yourself with that before stepping in. And often it's not a lot. Like for us, it's first responder, active military, and a diagnosis of infertility. Those go hand in hand. If you meet those, we say, we say great. We don't say great. That's not a great experience. But at that point, we absolutely can step in to support and provide resources.
And when you say diagnosis of infertility, does that include unexplained infertility as a diagnosis?
It does.
Some people think like, oh, I have to have a specific thing. But as we all know here, unexplained infertility is incredibly common. What is it, like a third of diagnoses?
And we see that too. So if someone has a provider they've been working with, or if they've done an initial workup, as an example, maybe they've done multiple IUIs and it hasn't been successful, their physician from us, I send them a letter asking for that piece around the medical diagnosis recommendation for what treatment looks like. So we work directly hand in hand with the provider or the practitioner that the person is working with. And then on our side, in terms of qualification, we have a medical team of physicians that work together to review every single application that comes through. Sometimes that could be that the person that's reached out to us has said, I'm working with this clinic, but in addition to applying for this application, I would love to find a clinic that can give me a second opinion. Occasionally that happens. Sometimes it's, do you agree with this piece? And if, depending on their state and who's reviewing that process, we'll share that information also. But it is done intentionally with physicians from many different clinics so that we can make sure that we have really an objective view at each individual or couple as they're applying.
I feel like that has to be the hardest part. I picture all of you in a room or on Zoom in a room being like, I want to give grants to these 25 people. And obviously we can't. So how do you decide out of the people that qualify, how to award the grant?
That's the hardest part.
Yeah.
Transparently. Though we all have one thing in common within the first responder, active military space, and we all share the common thread of infertility, every story is so different and so unique. Honoring those as if I wish we could give every single person all of the funds and all of the opportunities. And so it really does for us, it comes down to, one is, who are those clinic partners that can really help step in to provide an in-kind donation through Roaring Adventures and partner with us, or direct donation to Roaring Adventures, which we pass through to our families or recipients. And then our private donors that come alongside of us as well. So depending on the funds that are available really determines how much we can gift each quarter. Mm-hmm. We've been really fortunate at this point to be able to give, if they qualify. At this point, we've been able to provide 100% of all of our applicants with some form of grant or partnership. Wow. With that being said, as I share that here, I think it's really dependent for us. It's really dependent available funds. And that may not be the full amount of their treatment cycle. That could be from $500 up to $10,000, depending on, each case by case. I will say that we do give priority to those that will become first-time parents. Not that we aren't open to secondary infertility, because we are, and we have given those grants as well. But that priority does fall to those that are becoming parents for the first time when it comes to, if you will, comparing and having a board decision make. And so once the physicians have reviewed everyone's application, those come before the board of directors at Roaring Adventures, and then there's a vote that's taken, both by the amount and by who would be a recipient. And we go through each of those one by one, hard as that is. And I think the piece to know for us is it's not taken lightly. It's something that we know is so precious and is taken so seriously. It takes us a little bit of time to review those. So on average, after somebody has applied for a grant, we ask for 4 to 6 weeks following the close of that grant.
Still pretty fast. That's a lot to go through in that amount of time. So.
And sometimes the delay might be that we're not getting a response from the clinic, or we're not getting a response from an attorney that they might be working with, or an agency if they're looking to do foster to adoption. Depending on the agencies and partners that we're working with, sometimes they respond really quickly. Sometimes to get all of their medical records to review that with the physician team takes a little bit of time. And at this point, we've been pretty fortunate to not have to go past 6 weeks, but depending on where they're located in the United States, sometimes that presents challenges in itself. For us, we know that 60% of counties in the US don't have OBGYNs. And so if they're traveling and then that communication delay, often that's the piece that we work really hard on our side to try to get to move as fast as we can. And at the same time, making sure that the consideration and review is done comprehensively for each applicant.
Can applicants apply more than once?
They can. So if they aren't eligible or if they don't receive a grant in the specific quarter, they can continue to apply once a quarter. The piece to note for us is if they reapply, that application fee would be applicable with each round.
Can people apply for something different? Like if they had a treatment grant and it was not successful and now they want to explore adoption, can they reapply again, or?
They could do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So even if they were awarded a grant. Okay.
And application fees, they're there to support the organization, to just help do the work, to support, all the back. It sounds like there's a lot of background work that has to be done to fully evaluate each applicant to the best of your ability. So it does support the organization.
I think too, the other piece with any 501c3, that those donations, whether it be in kind, the application, is we're a tax deductible organization. So as you make a contribution to the organization, you're able to keep track of that also from the accounting side as well, if you have an accountant or someone that can help you with those pieces too.
I like that idea of having a friend or family member sponsor your application fee, because that's such a nice, easy way. I mean, people are always like, oh, let me know if I can do anything to help, in kind of this vague way.
That's a really specific and, measurable thing that people can do. I bet you anything, most people that are wanting to give some sort of support don't know how to. And you just say hey, how about these application fees? I would.
Yeah.
I think the other thing too is if someone comes to us and they apply for a grant or an application, let's say that they're pursuing surrogacy as an example, and they still need to bridge that gap from what the grant covers, the fertility clinic, as well as the gestational surrogacy piece.
Yeah, you're not able to fund a surrogacy cycle, I'm sure. Oh my gosh.
With that piece. And so we do have some incredible partners for surrogacy as well, but also on the financing side, if someone doesn't qualify for the full grant through us, we do have financing partners too that have stepped in to say, hey, we recognize that you're a first responder or an active military member. We're going to waive any application fees, or you have a reduced interest rate, or you don't have a prepayment penalty if they're able to do that. And so we try to help them see full picture as well. So even though we might not be able to meet them all the way at the end, what are some ways that we can rally around them, or partners that we know that can come alongside of them to get them to the ultimate goal of being able to grow their families? So
yeah, there's that village again.
And what about on the advocacy side? Because as great as your organization is, like in an ideal situation, you shouldn't exist, right? Everything should just be like covered for people. So yeah, what does Roaring Adventures do in terms of trying to, get that word out and help states have coverage and employees offer all that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. So specifically, I'll speak to Oregon first. For me personally, we have introduced and come alongside of legislation here in the state of Oregon for the last 10 years. Before Roaring Adventures even existed, my husband and I saw a need for access to care. I mean, it was our very first time we got onto an airplane and we flew out to Washington, D.C., not parents yet. Wow. We just couldn't understand how first responders, active military, and just Americans across the board could give selflessly, be faced with a medical diagnosis of infertility, and be met with no insurance coverage. It just blew our minds that we had to dissolve a 401k, sell a home, sell our vehicles, take out loans to become parents, something that we felt was human right or human desire, as you have a partner and want to grow your family. And so we have introduced many pieces of legislation in the state of Oregon specifically. There's currently one live in 2023, but that hasn't stopped just on the Oregon front. We partner with another organization to advocate for Americans all across the U.S. and what that looks like, both for anyone even outside of what our mission is. If you're experiencing infertility, we advocate for those people as well, whether you're in the military, first responder, or not. Outside of that, we feel like it's really important for us to also align with working toward improving access and coverage for people.
Yeah, and now more than ever, we need advocacy on many fronts, I feel.
Absolutely. So we feel very fortunate that we have a pretty incredible group. I know that even in Washington State, we've seen some big milestones and pushes moving forward.
It's like an adventure like yours, right? You go up and you go back and you go up and you go back and you get your hopes up like this is going to be the year and then, maybe next year. So yeah.
We're still on the hike. We're not quite at the top yet, right now.
But you're right, you can't let up that focus because like every session, you've got to like keep trying to move forward. And sometimes it's hard to not get frustrated because it seems like such a need and there's so much public goodwill and there's support. Like who wants to be like, no fertility care for first responders? Like it's a good public support issue, but it's still so hard to move anything forward.
Yeah, so. I mean, and specifically here in Oregon, we've seen that birth rates are at an all-time low. And so even that piece, like as we look ahead to what our communities across all of our states, what that looks like and how families will be able to grow as we see exposures and the environment and those pieces increasing. We also see in the other hand, we see infertility also increasing at, unfortunately, as you both know, remarkable rates, which is sad and hard all in the same breath.
But also so great that we have organizations like yours out there being public about the experience. Because I feel like that is one thing that is much better now than it was 15 years ago when I started here, is I feel like there's so much more, at least awareness of how common infertility is. I mean, I still think people don't quite get it, but at least it doesn't seem quite as strange and rare as it used to see when people really just wouldn't talk about it at all. So
agreed. I mean, I definitely think the more that for us, we feel like even for my husband as an example at the fire station, going from a community of firefighters that work together with kind of the community that's built within a fire department or within your crew, talking about fertility and those challenges can be really hard for first responders
yeah,
to
I have
share.
a hard time visualing them sitting around in the back and being like, how was your sperm test the other day? Like, it doesn't seem like it's a common conversation.
You know, sometimes we would hear those off the wall comments like, is it you or is it you or is it her?
Yeah.
Or, well, why don't you just adopt? Or why don't you guys just go on a vacation? Or all of the things that
all the top 10 lists that everyone can make of the terrible things people say.
Like, and so it's been an opportunity for us too, like to educate departments of, hey, here's how you can support your employees. Here's how you can support your crew. Like they live half of their lives at a station, half of their lives at home. But at the station, are there things that you could put in place to support your first responders? Do you offer a family building benefit to your employees? Are you talking about lifestyle modifications and exposures that your firefighters might be experiencing? Are you giving them tools to balance both, you know, if you're in law enforcement or regardless of which, you know, background as a first responder, are you giving them tools to be able to set themselves up for success in their private lives or their personal lives? Because often it's so integrated. We refer to the fire department as our fire family, and they are our family. Like even outside of our immediate families, they feel like they are also our immediate family. And so even just teaching how to change and shift that culture from, don't ask people when they're going to have kids.
Yeah.
Ask them like, how are you? If they want to share it, maybe create the opening, but they will share it. They may not just volunteer it, or saying that might be a trigger for them if they're navigating that hard journey. So,
well, especially, I mean, first responders by nature, like you're working in a stressful profession. And so like anything you can do to make the home life also not as stressful as well, or to minimize whatever stress you can control, that's going to make people more likely to stay in the field, because that's the challenge. Like all these professions, especially post-pandemic, people leave because there's only so long that you can cope with that amount of chronic stress. And so if infertility is an add-on on top of that, making that part at least a little better makes it easier for people to actually stay and do these really important jobs.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And being an Oregonian, I think you'll appreciate the last slide that I have in my presentation on stress coming up here at the symposium. And you've seen it.
Yes.
It is the Goonies flag. And instead of die, it says just relax. So Goonies don't never say just relax.
Yeah.
I'm like, I feel like great. Everybody in the Pacific Northwest, like,
we'll
if you know, you know. But like anybody that's like tuning in or like from a different part of the country might be like, what?
Come to the Pacific Northwest and we will show you.
Yeah. It's an obligation. You must see the Goonies if you live in the Pacific Northwest.
Any parting thoughts? Any last things you want to get out there about Roaring Adventures?
I think as people are approaching our organization, or really any organization to apply for a family building grant, I think telling your true story, the honesty and your personal story have weight and have value, whether or not you receive a grant. But it also creates that space for healing and sharing your story and that openness, and that can feel very empowering. Often, with applications, any organization that's providing family building grants or grants, financial grants or support, we know that there's a financial need, or you probably wouldn't be applying for the grant.
Yeah, it's not just for fun that you're like, oh, let me write this long application.
Right. So I think that sometimes might be forgotten as people apply for the grants and they say, we really need X, Y, or Z, when their personal story is enough. Their journey, they are enough. With or without that story, I think that carries a pretty incredible impact when you're sharing that up and you're vulnerable to sharing that. I think for us, we're so honored. And like I shared earlier, we're so honored and humbled just to be able to support others, to be able to pay it forward for anyone that wants to be a part of our organization. Like I mentioned, we're able to provide our grants because of donors and partners that we have across the United States. And so we're always open to collaborations. If people reach out to me and they say, I'm not sure how we could fit, but we might be interested, great, let's have a conversation. We will figure out a unique way, even if it might not be the traditional way. I think that's the beautiful part of being, if you will, newer. We're about 2 years old as an organization, but it's given us the agility and ability to to think outside of the box and how we can partner with other groups and organizations as well. And we're just, thank you both so much for the opportunity just to share. I think more than anything, we want to bring support and awareness and education to as many people as we can through our mission at Roaring Adventures.
Thank you so much.
We'll definitely link all the stuff that you mentioned in our show notes so people can find out more, including the book. I definitely want to check that out. So
thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of the Whole Pineapple Podcast. We hope it was helpful.
If you know someone who could benefit from hearing the podcast, we hope you'll share it with them.
And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the Whole Pineapple on your favorite podcast app. Every rating and review makes us easier to find.
This podcast is sponsored by Seattle Reproductive Medicine and is produced by Audiotocracy Podcast Production. We'll see you next time. Have a delicious week.